Ball State takes a loss this week to JMU 63-7, but this week they are coming up on their second home game and their second game in the Mid-American Conference. Thank you for joining me on Linking the Chains. I'm your host, Isaiah Rosner, and in just a few minutes, I will be joined by the voice of Ball State, Mick Tidrow. Let's get right into it.
Third and goal, looks toward Magwood. Nobody's open. Samanza scampers. He has open daylight, jumps toward the end zone, barrels in, and he is in.
Samanza looking left, towards the end zone. It is caught. Touchdown. Tanner Koziel.
Caught by Gilly. Breaks one tackle, breaks a second. Malcolm Gilly's off to the races. Malcolm Gilly scores.
Welcome back to Linking the Chains. Now we've got our special guest on. I welcome in Mick Tidrow, the voice of Ball State. Mick, thanks for joining me. I was mentioning earlier, you're my first guest that's not currently in SportsLink, but you did graduate from SportsLink. You're a SportsLink alum, and now being the voice of Ball State. You want to tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, Isaiah, I really appreciate you having me on the show. It's great to join you and talk about Ball State athletics, and we'll get to football, of course, but I'm really excited to be on the show. So I finished up my bachelor's degree from Ball State 2018 and then came back for 2 more years, got my master's degree in 2020, and decided to come back as a SportsLink graduate assistant. So I got to work a little bit more with the staff of Chris Taylor and Alex Cartman and learn a little bit more of the leadership of academic, but also from an athletic standpoint too. And then for 2.5 years upon graduation, went out to North Dakota and spent some time with a regional network out there and really just gained a ton of experience. It was 300 plus games in 2.5 years. And so it was just TV all the time and try to figure out what works for me, what doesn't work for me. And just a huge learning experience. We called professional, semi-professional, collegiate, and high school events. So really had a chance to have a bigger portfolio of sports and levels of sports. And we even did some games in studios. So we had a chance to learn remote productions and dive into that space because COVID had just started when I took the job out there. So I had to learn, when our company had to learn, of how to do things a little bit differently and make sure that we were covering the athletes still with TV broadcast. So we'd have a decent amount of games in studio, and just every game it was, what do we need to do today to get better from a broadcast standpoint? Is it vocabulary today? Is it how to use your voice a little bit? Is it breathing technique? So always just try to focus on 1 or 2 things every game to improve on. And I was going through the final stages of the region basketball tournament for high school in Jamestown, North Dakota. It was March 10th, 2022. And I had seen a tweet that the previous voice of the Cardinals, Joel Gaudette, was going to leave Ball State. And I just kind of sat in the car on the ride home and was like, wow, okay. I'm going to send a note to some people in Ball State who I know and connected with when I was a student and just say, hey, I'm interested. I know you're far away from the process of making any decisions, but reached out to then athletic director Beth Getz, Sean Sullivan, who's a deputy athletic director as well, and just said, hey, I know that there's months to go until a decision's made or even a process begins, but just want you to know that I'm interested if you would be willing to have a conversation with me. So had a few phone calls with them throughout the next couple of months, and then they had the formal process open up. And June, July came around, and I was pulling into my workplace at the time and got a call from Sean Sullivan, and he said, hey, you're on speaker. I'm going to loop somebody else in, and kind of got, a little sweaty. I was like, my palms are sweating. And then he just said, hey, we've got everybody on the call. How would you like to be the next voice of the Cardinals? Wow. And I just had chills go down my entire body, and it was the ultimate honor for me to get that phone call from Sean. And then Beth called me, Coach Lewis, Coach New, Coach Maloney, and Coach Sally. A bunch of coaches started calling me and just saying congratulations. And to me, it was just the ultimate honor because I'd worked with so many of those folks as a student and learned from them just different ways to be in athletics. And it was a really cool moment. So it's a long way of answering your question, Isaiah. But at the end of the day, like coming back here now, this is my 3rd year back. It's the ultimate honor. I walk the hallways here, and it's the ultimate honor. And to be invited back to SportsLink for projects and to have the partnership with athletics and SportsLink that we have now, specifically this year, I think it's great for everybody involved. In the last 2.5 years back at at Ball State have just been like an eye-opening experience, especially for somebody who just graduated 4 years ago. So
that's awesome. Great insight. Really interesting for that experience. I've got to ask you. You mentioned a lot about TV in your first job out of college. I've got to ask you, doing radio now, of course, for football and men's basketball, which I know is probably a rarer job to stumble across. I personally prefer radio, and so I don't know about you, but what is it like to do every Ball State game on the radio?
Yeah, so I think radio is a fun medium just because it's so different than TV. You have two different experiences when you're calling TV versus radio. And for me, I love the challenge of radio, especially for football games, because you only have 12 plus a year, and the chances are few and far between. And then once you're done in December, January, whenever a team finishes up, you've got to wait months before you can get back out there and call a game on the radio for football. And that's been a real adjustment and challenge for me, of just making sure that every week I have a routine of Mondays this, Tuesdays this, Wednesdays that, and every day doing something to get ready for football on the radio to make sure. But I love it. And the opportunity to do that for men's basketball as well, for the majority of those games on the radio, and then sliding over to TV for a few for men's as well, is an enjoyable experience. And then having the responsibility of doing TV for a bunch of the other sports as well outside of football, men's basketball is great because I get to do about 50 plus radio, 50 plus TV games a year. So it's right down the middle to where I can continue to hone my craft, but also just have the challenge of telling stories on those two mediums. I think is really exciting.
Well, speaking of football, of course, that JMU game, not a great one for Ball State, 63-7 loss for the Cardinals. What was it like, though, to be at JMU Stadium calling that one?
Yeah, I think Coach New said it really well. He's like, that environment was pretty great. Like 25,000 fans. Sold out family weekend crowd, which what Ball State has this weekend, family weekend coming up against Western Michigan. But I think for me, calling the games on the radio is really fun. We have a new radio analyst, Chris Radican, and he's awesome. Like he's only had 4 games into this, but going through a week-to-week basis, working with him and him finding like what works for him, and him being introduced to the Ball State audience again, because he played offensive line here at Ball State. And was an O-lineman when Coach New played as well. So he has ties to the program, knows a lot of the coaches, and he spent 30 years as an Indiana high school football coach. So he has the ties with a lot of the coaches in this conference because of recruiting and things like that, and kids wanting to go to programs to play collegiate football. So there's so much knowledge he has, and in any game, any circumstance, any situation, I love to lean on Chris to talk about his experiences and kind of jab with him back and forth and tease him about something, because when you have that type of banter and that fun on the air, I think it really shines through, and it gives the audience a chance to get to know who Chris is, because some people know who he is from when he played, but for a lot of people who are listening, you're reintroducing him to a new audience.
I know just from doing some radio myself, it can be really tough sometimes to build that chemistry, especially for radio broadcasters when the play-by-play man's going to do more of the talking in general. So that's really interesting to hear how much you enjoy that. Talking more about Ball State football, though, of course, 1-3 now. I feel like it's kind of a tough schedule to start the year, and it's not unheard of to have 2 really difficult games, but week 5 now, I mean, Ball State's 4th game at week 5 already, and they're still playing JMU. I mean, I know we're getting more into action now, but sometimes I worry about the confidence of the team. I mean, you had that really tough team you played 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, and then you have the brutal loss against Central Michigan, and then this one this week. So do you worry at all about the confidence of the team?
I don't, Isaiah. I think that they came out this past Tuesday with a really good level of energy at practice, and the confidence level was high. They're flying around. They're making sure that they're keeping their teammates accountable. And just talking with Coach New on Tuesday after practice, he said the same thing. He said, hey, the energy was great today. The response has been awesome. Like from what I stood and looked at, it looked like the best Tuesday they've had from a practice standpoint all year. So I think from a confidence area, they're in a good spot. And look, Isaiah, you win Saturday, things turn around, right? Like that happens quick, and you're gonna have a great crowd with family weekend, and only 1 MAC game so far in the books. So having a second MAC game here week 5 of the year, a little advantageous that they've seen a little bit of MAC competition already with that one against Central Michigan. So I think from a confidence standpoint, it starts with the head coach. It starts with your leaders on offense and defense, and knowing Cade Samanza and Keontae Newsom, those 2 are going to be confident in leading their group and have that team ready to go.
Well, talking about Samanza, now this is the first game of the year that I didn't watch live. I was actually stage manager of women's volleyball broadcast, which was a ton of fun. But I did, of course, watch the replay later on. And so I've got to ask the interceptions for Samanza. 3 of them, of course, one pick six, and some others that were nearly intercepted. That said, I kind of felt like most of them weren't his fault. It seemed like a lot of tipped balls, and I mean there was that one play where the defensive lineman backed up, and that can be tough to see. But I guess I feel like Samanza was better than the stat sheet showed, and I was curious of your take on that.
Yeah, I think he definitely was, and those are some of those plays like the tips that it's just natural to the game of football. We saw that week 1 against Missouri State, just those weird things start to happen, but he definitely showed the calm, competitive, and collectedness that he's done all year, and especially the first couple of drives, he leads the team down the field after throwing that interception, after that ball was tipped off of a receiver, tight end's hand, to then respond and go down and score and show that, hey, that interception didn't affect me, doesn't matter, I think was crucial in any quarterback's development. So how does one respond to something like that happening, whether it's a tip ball or an interception thrown? But Cade responds. He did that against Missouri State when he had the pick six. He came back and led the team to 42 points. So I think from his standpoint, he's always ready to go. And what I really respect about him is just how much when there is something that doesn't go his way, he finds a way to come back and really command the offense and command the team and say, hey, let's just flush that and come back and go score.
On the defensive end, I kind of thought the defensive line was a strong point for this team this game. Despite the high output of scoring from the Duke's offense, I felt like, they got 3 sacks, Freeney getting 2 of those, and I feel like they've created a lot of pressure on other plays as well. Maybe not so much for the run game, but maybe it wasn't enough to be good against James Madison. But do you think that could be a good sign for the future in action for Ball State?
Yeah, I think a lot of the defensive line is really finding a groove, and Riley Tolsma has been a huge bright spot. Like, he's been all over the place, either sacking the quarterback or putting on quarterback hits and pressures. He's been a really welcome addition to that defensive line, and that was the big talking point coming into the year, right, is, hey, the defensive line is really new. What are we going to see from them? And I think it's been encouraging the way that they respond. And Darren Conley a couple weeks ago had the block extra point against Central Michigan, and Sam Feeney comes in. I know he's on defensive line, but from a defensive standpoint, gets a couple of snaps, has a few sacks against James Madison, so you're seeing some of these spurts of really good play. But that defensive line, I think you look at that and the growth that they're having and the pieces that they've been able to put together. You've seen what they can do with Conley and Tolsma and a few others, but those are some just to name a few of those moments.
Well, thank you very much, Mick. When we come back, Mick will stay right here with us, and we will preview the upcoming home game for Ball State against Western Michigan. First, here's an interview with Coach Mike New.
Coach, obviously a tough loss this weekend against James Madison. What's been your message to the team in terms of putting that game behind you?
I think most importantly, just don't stop believing, man. Stay by each other's side. We got a lot of football left to be played. Now we're turning our attention back to playing in conference against Western Michigan. So we can't let that linger on, and I really feel confident that our guys will respond. I know it's all about making sure we have a great week of preparation here. We can't change that outcome, but we got to make sure that we keep believing, keep attacking it, and I feel confident we got a lot of good football ahead of us.
And you are getting into the heart of MAC play now, so how has that message and how does that mentality shift as you head into a game like Western Michigan?
Well, it also helps too, not only coming from me, but some of our veteran players that have been in this conference, and they know what it's like. It's a wide open race. Obviously once MAC teams finish their non-conference schedule, there's really good football in this conference week in, week out, and so the goal for us is to make sure we got our best stuff. We got our A game week in, week out, because that's what's most important in order to put yourself in a position to win each and every week.
And this has been a Western Michigan team that's played not only a solid non-conference schedule, but they also perform pretty well. What's one thing that's jumped off the page at you about this Broncos squad?
Well, they're going to be tough. They're going to play well. They're going to give you great effort. They're going to be physical. They want to do a great job of establishing the run game. They've been awesome at that the last 2 games they've had. They're going to be one of those teams that challenges you. They're going to do a good job of trying to devote their attention to stopping the run. So for us, we got to have a great plan in place. It's a challenge on our end too. We got to be great at stopping the run defense. defensively. We got to be great on our end of getting the run game established. So they're going to be hungry. They're going to come in here, and obviously this is Coach Taylor's second full year there now. Western Michigan, he's done a really good job. Obviously, like all teams in the MAC, he's we've all had some guys that we lost to the portal. But we've also all been able to add some key pieces. So it's going to be a team that, especially after the last 2 weeks watching them on tape, we're going to have to make sure we execute at a high level.
In terms of actually stopping the run against the Broncos this weekend, I know it was a bit of a tougher tackling weekend against James Madison. How does the team flip the script on that heading into Western Michigan?
I think most importantly, again, it sounds like a simple answer and message, but it really comes down to each guy doing his job, man, because when we have 11 guys executing at a high level, there's some awesome stuff on tape. That's my job, is to make sure I show that to our guys this week, and the proof is in the pudding, man, when each guy does that and he does his job, and it's great to watch the execution at a high level, and we can get that done, and that's my job, to make sure that I get that focus where it needs to be and make sure our guys respond.
I want to turn the focus to the offensive side of the ball now. Caden Samanza had looked really impressive so far this season. He made some extra mistakes against James Madison, though. What was your message specifically to him after that performance last week?
Oh, listen, those things happen. Here's a redshirt freshman quarterback. Obviously that first throw was just off the fingertips, and so, when turnovers happen, it's tough to be able to overcome those and win games. He knows that. He's his own worst critic. Obviously he could tell you exactly what he was seeing, even when he came back between series and watched the iPad there with Coach Lynch. So it's really just a matter of getting back to work. That's not going to have an impact on him. He's tough. He's mentally tough. So he'll come back and respond. And, I fully expect him to have his best week.
We're back in the shoe for just the second time this season. It is family weekend. What do you expect the atmosphere to be like? I know there was a great crowd week one.
Yeah, we need that. And obviously I want our fans to keep believing and not to give up hope, and we can have a great year here. Obviously the story isn't written yet, so there's a lot of football left to be played. It's awesome to be able to come back here at home, and we need them. We need a great environment here for our guys to feed off of and get the energy where it needs to be.
Yeah, we saw it against Central Michigan. It seems like every time you play a MAC opponent, it's always going to come right down to the wire. What's going to be the key to get your team over the hump if we do see a close game late?
Playing 60 minutes. That's the most important thing. We got to play 60 minutes, have great football, the best that we got, and go execute at a high level and make sure our guys are bought into that. Very confident our guys will respond to that. It all starts with what we do on the practice field this week, and our guys are ready to get back out there.
Appreciate it, Coach. Good luck to you.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Mick Tidrow here, the voice of Ball State. Ball State football coming up are playing against Western Michigan this upcoming week. So a battle of 1 and 3 teams, both coming off of a loss against a Sun Belt team, although Western Michigan's was quite a bit closer at 27-20. That said, Ball State come into this one as heavy underdogs. The ESPN odds that I saw, you can take Ball State for plus 270. Favored by 9.5 points in this one. I guess I'm a little bit surprised. I suppose talent-wise, you could say Western Michigan has the upper hand, but I think Ball State being at home, I feel like they have a better chance than that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the chances are always high when Ball State's playing at Schumann Stadium and with the chance to respond after last week. I think that they're going to be very motivated to show out, especially from a family weekend crowd, and that always adds so much energy and atmosphere to things, Isaiah. When you put Ball State back at Schumann Stadium, there's just that feeling. And talking to Braden Sloan after practice on Tuesday, I just asked him, like, hey, what was it like for you to run out week one against Missouri State in front of the Schumann Stadium crowd? And he said it was awesome. Like, you just could feel the energy, that the building was on fire in a way. And he said that was just such a fun atmosphere and environment. He can't wait to see that even more juiced with family weekend. So the environment will be great, and you've got two teams that are, each hungry for wins, and for Ball State having that second MAC game and one already in the books, be even more motivated.
It will be Western Michigan's MAC opener in this one. I think the biggest concern for Ball State, or at least the thing they need to focus on the most for me, is stopping the run. Because looking at Western Michigan, they have 712 rush yards on the year compared to 643 pass yards. So obviously a huge strength for Western Michigan, and that's kind of been Ball State's weakness throughout the season, is their run defense. So it's a tough question, but how do you counter that?
Yeah, I think the big thing with Western Michigan is they've always been a really good running football team, and Jalen Buckley hasn't really played much this year, which is a surprise. Just because he played against Wisconsin, had 64 rushing yards, but hasn't appeared in the last 3 games. So we'll see if he goes against Ball State here on Saturday. But they've always had a really good stable of running backs, and you've got a transfer that has come in and and produced and put up almost 300 yards in the last 2 games combined. So he's somebody to look out for. And when you have running backs like that, the MAC has been known to have really good running backs. Like Buckley was a freshman of the year last year in the conference, and he's missed the last 3 games. Western Michigan brings in somebody else that's really replaced him since Buckley's been out. So from that standpoint, I think it's just setting the tone early. When we talked about the defensive line, just that defensive line coming together and finding ways to not let Western Michigan get to that 2nd and 3rd level consistently. So if you see that, then force Western Michigan to throw it, and then Ball State not bite off that play action, which they'll be disciplined and ready to go for that. I think those are biggest keys defensively against the run game.
Jade Nixon, 54 carries, 360 yards on the season. Also, Zahir Abdus Salam with 180 yards and 2 touchdowns on the season. Also, 3 touchdowns for Nixon as well. Like I said, second MAC game for Ball State, first one for Western Michigan. They both lost to a Sun Belt opponent last week, so a lot of similarities in this one, but being at Ball State's home, I think you kind of mentioned it, but the urgency is starting to trend up for Ball State. Of course, only 1 MAC game so far, but I think when you lose to Central Michigan, if you want to be in contention for the MAC championship, this is a win you pretty much have to have.
Yeah, it's a big weekend, I think, just from all the standpoints of competing again and wanting to bounce back. Like, this is a team that's been on the road for 3 straight weeks in Ball State that's ready to be home and have a chance to do that against a conference opponent and to do it on family weekend. I think that you have all of those things put together to make for a really exciting weekend. And when you have a chance to respond after things haven't gone your way, it's a big test. And I think Ball State's ready to go for that test.
And then here's a stat that I thought was really interesting. I'm sure you have it already prepared in your boards for this upcoming game. But how about Ball State, number 6 in the FBS in time of possession, averaging where is it? It was just under 34 minutes, I believe, per game, which I guess doesn't sound incredibly high, but in general, teams are just pretty average with this. So through 4 games to have that much time of possession. And then Western Michigan, number 112 out of 133 teams in the FBS. Notably, they're not last in the MAC, however. Northern Illinois is below them. I think just 1 spot below them. But either way, how do you think that could affect this game? And kind of a 2-part question. Also, do you think that's overall a testament to the Ball State offense that they're so high, or do you think it's more of a thing with the defense allowing quick scores?
I think it has to do with the offense, because when you see the offense, some of the time of possessions with some of the drives, they've been able to sustain drives and go score or be in plus territory a lot of the time. So I think it's really what we've seen from the offensive standpoint and how many drives that they've had that are sustained. So in a game like any in the MAC, the time of possession really plays a big factor, because they're almost always 1-score games, 1 to 2 score games. And if you win the time of possession, you're giving yourself more time to score, and your odds are going up. And we've seen that in the past. So the 6th in the country, I think, is a testament to how Cade and the offense and Coach Elliott are calling things to make sure that they are moving the ball and doing what they need to do. So I think it has a lot to do with what we can see from the team, and especially against Central Michigan. That time of possession was really lopsided, especially in the first half. I think it was 23-7 in favor of Ball State in the first half, and the Cards trailed at halftime. So when you look at what they were doing, they were moving the ball, and they have the ball for a long period of time. But that's going to start paying dividends as you go throughout the course of the season. When you have that big a time of possession, I think you're going to start seeing more points and things like that start to take place too.
I was just looking and seeing that Ball State has probably a disproportionate amount of yards in comparison to points. Like they've been moving the ball, like you said, most of these games, just haven't been able to find a way to score. So my conclusion at first was, I've watched the games, but I was thinking they must have had some red zone turnovers, some red zone struggles, but they've scored all but 1 time in the red zone, and 1 field goal. I think it was 7 touchdowns. So so they've been good in the red zone. They've been able to move the ball. What do you think has stopped them from scoring?
I think you look at just the competition that they face too, with some pretty good defenses. I think you have to give some credit to Miami and James Madison for having really solid defenses, of course. And I think some of it is in the Miami game, we saw the offense moving the football, especially the first couple of drives, and they'd be in like a 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3 in plus territory, and Miami would bring the house. So I think you're looking at circumstantial and situational football that teams are trying to scheme, and Ball State is working through that. But at the end of the day, I think when you have those types of challenges early in the season, the tape will start to tell the story of how the players can go through and start to to get first downs on those fourth downs or get to the red zone and score. Because like you said, they've really good in the red zone. You get to the red zone, it's been automatic for Ball State. So I think finding ways to get there and finish is the most important part. But yeah, I think you'll start to see that improvement and all that throughout the year.
Well, Ball State takes on Western Michigan at home this Saturday at 2 p.m. He's Mick Tidrow, the voice of the Cardinals, and he will be calling that game, as always, on the radio. I will be at the game as well, coiling the I'll be doing the over-under technique on the cable for a camera for the ESPN Plus broadcast, so that should be a lot of fun. But Mick, thank you for joining me, of course, and that will pretty much do it for this episode of Linking the Chains. Ball State, Western Michigan this Saturday.
2 seconds and 1, and Ball State will walk home victorious.
Linking the Chains is hosted and produced weekly by Isaiah Rosner. This has been a production of Ball State Sports Link.